Hi there, welcome to this Google Hangout that is part of the Coursera course, the massive open online course, Terrorism and Counterterrorism, comparing theory and practice. And my name is Edwin Bakker, and I'm teaching this course together with a whole team of people that help to see what's going on in the discussion forum, and of course together with all the participants. And the participants of this course are not only people that joined the Coursera course, but also regular students from Leiden and Delft University in the Netherlands that take this or watch these videos as part of their bachelor course on terrorism and counterterrorism as part of a minor global affairs and a minor safety, security and justice. And the issue or the topic that we want to discuss this week is a sensitive one, a difficult one. And we're not going to show some of the pictures because it relates very much to pictures, videos that were released by IS, Islamic State, the rebel organization, insurgency, terrorist organization in Syria and Iraq that has showed a number of videos, presented a number of videos to the world of beheadings of their opponents. An American journalist, 8 workers, but also a lot of Syrian victims and Iraqi victims. And the question arises, why are they doing this? What do they want to achieve by showing these horrible pictures to the rest of the world? That they do this with some idea in mind, that it's an organized character, became very clear, especially more recently with the beheadings of a number of Syrian opponents by a number of foreign fighters from many different countries, that some of them quite openly, without a mask or anything, cut off the throats of the poor victims that were kneeled in front of them. Why on earth does IS want to do that and plan and orchestrate these kind of things? This is one of the questions that I want to discuss with a number of participants of the course. We have 2 participants of the Coursera course, Cassandra Gomez-Hochberg, who has a background in agricultural and environmental engineering, but who is now currently more into the field of journalism, as a background both from Brazil and Israel. So Cassandra, very welcome. The second participant of the massive open online course is Ignacio Gonzalez, a mechanical engineer, 15 years of experience in turbine industry. That is interesting, but even more relevant is his background in the Spanish Army. As an officer, he served in many international missions for the UN, for NATO, trained in mountain warfare, EOD and intelligence. So Ignacio, welcome to this Google Hangout. And then I'm very proud to say that we also have 2 of our own students. First, Armin from Leiden, who is following the course Global Affairs, is studying political science at Leiden University with an interest in international relations and organizations. So Armin, welcome. And then Nelleke, I think you just came from an internship at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is just around the corner. And you didn't send your CV because you just had your birthday yesterday. So congratulations, Nelleke. And
I work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
You work there. Good. Well, so we're neighbors because our office is actually next door in The Hague. Which is not the capital of the Netherlands, but the place where all the ministries are, and the parliament and the king, and a good place to study terrorism and counterterrorism with all these actors. So we have a number of questions. I first mention them, and then I would like to give somebody the floor to react on these questions. So first, the question: what is the goal of IS? So Islamic State, of showing a number of foreign fighters from various countries cutting off heads of Syrian opponents. What is the goal? And then the second question is, what are the audience? What audience do they try to reach? And then third question, Are they successful in achieving this goal? And then maybe a difficult question for a lot of journalists. So maybe that's a question I would like to ask Cassandra. So maybe if you hold your horses and wait for the last question. If you have a personal blog or you're an editor of a newspaper or a radio or a television station, would you show these pictures, videos to your audience? So the first question, what is the goal of IS? Who may I give the floor? Nelleke, you're closest. So please, and I'll have to, and that's very important, the mute button. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, we discussed this in class earlier, and I talked about it to a few of my peers, and we get very different answers. And I think the goals of IS are multiple, but specifically the videos, we think it's to, I think it's to install fear and an exposure of power, because they don't have so much formal power. It's a way to show the rest of the world all their power. So I think that's the most important goal.
May I invite others to react? So it's a show of force. That's an important element, and that's one of the reasons, according to Nelleke. May I hear reactions from the others?
Oh, I can take the floor, if I may. I think they're also, in accordance to Nelleke, yes, of course, they want to incite fear into us in the West by showing these beheadings and these brutal murders. They want to make us fear their entire ideology and all of their people, but they also want to appeal to some of the youths here, who they can recruit maybe, so they can find in these people some recruits and then possibly get them to Syria or Iraq to fight with them. Because these videos, of course, not appeal to us because they're just brutal. But if you have a resentment against the West and against the status quo in the Middle East, well, you might be appealed. These videos might appeal to you. So I think that's also a way of sending a message to those people. And the further point I would think is its provocation against the West and against the other status quo of the other governments in the Middle East.
Thank you. So not only power, but provocation, but even maybe a tool to recruit people. And I guess a lot of people can hardly imagine that if you see these pictures that you think, hey, that's great, I want to join these guys. But apparently, maybe also in relation to the show of force, it has some appeal to at least some people. Ignacio, may I hear your opinion on this?
Yes, so I agree. I think it's a multi-purpose video with different intentions and for different audiences. Main purpose, of course, is to spread fear, and I think they made some specific references to Western countries. But in my opinion, the people that appears without any veil on his face, that are already some of them identified as French, English, Filipino people, they try to show the rest of the world that this movement is not only a local movement, it's coming from all around the world. So this is a very important signal for the rest of the countries. Hey guys, you have the potential menace at home in your countries. If not now, you will have it. And from a psychological point of view, I think it's very, very relevant that they are showing people from these Western or other countries cutting heads to also other European or Western people. It's not the same, it's not an idea of people from the Middle East cutting heads from Europeans or whatever. It's not a local issue. It's a worldwide issue with a very potential high-level fear.
And Cassandra, may I have your take on this?
Yeah, I think there is a very big element of provocation, especially because they announce the victims beforehand and they set a series of demands. And anyways, like I think it's clear that they will conduct this act anyway. So I think it's a provocation to the United States and a provocation to the West.
You have to unmute yourself first.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, classical. But you mentioned the West. In this course, the Coursera course, we talked about Western bias. We also asked this question to a lot of students, and many have the idea that this is a video against the West. Cassandra, is that also is that really the main audience? You mentioned the West as maybe the primary audience of that. Do you agree that, or do you have some other ideas about that?
No, I don't think the West is the primary audience. Also, when others mention that it's a way of recruiting, I think that's a very big important issue in these videos. And I think it's not the West, it's the world. There's some sort of like clash of civilizations that they want to show in this video, of the Islam, of what they call the Islam, and of the rest. And even what they call the Islam it's not what other Muslims call the Islam. So I think it's very important to point out that their Islamic idea, it's not actually Islam.
Okay, I'm not sure everybody would agree on that, especially IS themselves, of course. Their banner being, of course, the slogan, the symbol of Islam. Actually, the key, the founding idea of Islam, the statement that there's only one God but Allah. So I'm not sure if everybody agrees. You mentioned the term clash of civilization. Maybe Armin, you study political science with an interest in international relations. I know that this idea of clash of civilization is not something that is that's not a general accepted opinion, but what's your take on that? You studying political relations and of political science and international relations?
Well, I think the clash of civilization is the way they want to portray it to the world. It's a us versus them story. So they always stand out, we're the true Muslims. I'm not saying that they are, but they say of themselves, and we're the true believers. We're the only ones who carry this out this way. And they also say that we, the West and the rest of the world, are crusaders, actually. Today I just read their bit into their glossy newspaper that they have, the Dabik. I don't know if I don't pronounce it right, but it's very much a crusaders, us versus them story. So in that perspective, I think they want to frame the entire story as it's us versus the rest of the world. And if you're against us, then well, you will suffer the same consequences as those people who got beheaded. I think that's the message that they want to send, and to their own people as well, to try to frame it in such a simplistic way.
Thank you. By the way, other people can also react, not only you guys, but also wider audience. They can type in questions that Janine will then somehow warn me that there's a question from the audience. So I should have said that, of course, at the start of this meeting, but some of the participants of previous Google Hangouts know this, and I hope that there's maybe some additional remarks and questions.
I have one thing about that, please. Please ask your questions on the YouTube channel and not the Q&A app here on Google, because it's not working properly, but we also posted a YouTube link, and if you go to YouTube, I will read that channel, so please go to that link.
Well, let's see if that works. Ignacio, you said that this international group of people that they present to the world, showing that it's a worldwide phenomenon. I was just wondering, again, the question of the audience. What would you think that is the main audience of these videos? I mean, they orchestrated it, they organized it. Who did they have in mind that they want to have an impact on, or wanted them to show what they're actually doing? Are you still there, Ignacio? Then may I ask Nelleke to...
Yes, you may. I already thought we lost Ignacio. I think the audience, and it's kind of the same as what is their goal, is it anti-Western or not? I think the audience is anyone who thinks differently. I don't think it's just the West, and I totally agree with the others on that. I think the main audience is, however, anyone with a mobile phone. Maybe local people, I'm not very familiar local, but don't have access to these videos as easily. So I can imagine that it may be the more developed world where they're not actually physically in, so they want to reach that as well via the videos. But there's also specific videos, like in the case with the British journalist and the British guy that beheaded him, that's obviously very much focused on the UK, and I think that with every video that may be different, but you can see it. I don't want to answer the next question already, but you can see that's more successful. It's more successful to really show that, you know, it's the UK and we have an effect on you too, even though it happens here.
We'll come back to the success factor, especially with the video of the beheading of James Foley. The impact was enormous, I think. I think what we somehow tend to forget watching what's happening in Syria is, of course, the victims there, and most of the victims are people from Syria. And we very much have the tendency to see this as something aimed against us. But the victims were poor Syrians that happened not to be on the side of IS. And of course, the impact of the videos, in my eyes, was also very much directed to the Syrian population, that the whole Ummah will kill you if you don't join IS. So I think one of the main audiences, or a very important audience, was the Syrian people as well. And they have access to the internet. They see these videos as well. And then maybe IS wanted to see that the whole Ummah, the whole community of believers, is actually united against those that support the regime. So that we tend to forget, very much look at the consequences of foreign fighters to the rest of the world, but let's not forget the victims in Syria. Then, yes, the third question is success of whether or not IS is successful in showing these videos. We mentioned a number of possible goals. Of course, we don't know exactly what they had in mind. The show of power, provocation, recruitment, showing the world that this is not a local but a truly global international movement. Who may I give the floor? Maybe Ignacio, we lost you, but you're back, so that's great. Do you think in some way, or in what way, are they successful or not?
Well, I think they are partially successful. They are achieving their goal, that is to spread the message. It's a very, let's say, cheap message. It's not, it has not the cost of a terrorist action in a capital city of any of the Western countries, and they found a very good vector to spread their message. So I think they are partially successful. And regarding what you say before about also a part of the message for the Syrian audience, I think that is relevant that in this video the victims, they do not send any message as in the previous killings we have seen. I think that the idea is it doesn't matter if they are officers of the army, if they are pilots, if they are soldiers from the ranks, all the Syrians will be treated in the same manner. So yes, there is a message for the Western countries, but I think there is a very important message for their direct enemy on the battlefield, that is the Syrian government. So I think they are partially successful in all these kind of intentions at the same time, yes.
Or maybe with your military background, this brutal violence, as we have seen in Iraq, of course, if you are on the other side and they're about to attack you, and you know that if you ever get captured by these guys, they will butcher you. It has an effect, I guess, on the fight, the will to fight of the opponents, as we have seen in Iraq, that some of them really start to run because of the brutalities on the battlefield. Am I correct in gathering from your answer that it also has an effect on the battlefield itself, a show of brutal force that their opponents, if they still can run, maybe want to opt for that option and instead of ever falling into the hands of the opponent?
And maybe not only for the enemy, maybe not only for the guys that are in front of you, that they will be afraid of this kind of acts, but they have also another effect in your ranks. They are closing ranks, they are totally forcing a commitment, a blind commitment to any order, and they will not hesitate in anything. So these guys, for instance, that appear in the videos without any mask, I think they don't have any other option than dying in combat or being future human bombs, suicide bombs. So I think they are closing ranks also to avoid any other internal problems. They are having some defections. So I think they are spreading also a message in both directions, towards the enemy, just to afraid them of what will happen, and towards internally, just to close ranks to their organization. These guys appear as a Praetorian guard around the man that is with the, we cannot see his face, and they are, I think, sending this message of totally blind obedience to the statements and the rules of IS.
Thank you. Cassandra, may I ask you, depending on how you define the goal, of course, do you think it's successful or unsuccessful? I haven't heard anybody say it's unsuccessful. Not that I want to hear that from you, but do you see other elements to this, to the question regarding whether this is a successful or, you know, a valuable instrument? One may hope that it's not, but so far we get the impression that it is quite a powerful tool. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
I think it's successful from the point of view of recruiting and from spreading fear, but I think it's unsuccessful because it brings a lot of, also from the Muslim world, it brings a lot of contradiction. And I think many Muslim countries are put in this big paradox, especially with the West, this big contradiction of what ISIS is doing, and the world sometimes think that we are like this, and we are not. So I think there is a big fight within the Muslim world with this question. So I think it's unsuccessful from this point of view. But maybe that's their point as well. So,
Armin, can I hear you on this?
Well, I think they're quite successful with their goals. It's just the means by what they do. Of course, it's horrific, the acts, but the professional side of it, the way they film it, it's so much different from the way the old Al-Qaeda used to film their work. I mean, they showed Osama bin Laden with a handy cam shot in a cave, and these are very professionally edited videos, not shot with a webcam like I'm filming right now, so they do their best in that way. And you can see that every step is truly planned. So I don't think it's just an utter reaction. They gather these men, and they plan out who is going to cut them, cut their heads off, to say it so bluntly. And I think they are successful because it does appeal to some people, because there's still recruits going to Syria as we speak. Of course, the security is now tighter in Europe because the intelligence agencies are more aware of the problem. But I also think that they incite fear in us here in the West very much, because as I told you, I was reading through their magazine, and one of their goals was to put fear in us that if we walk on the streets here, that we'll be afraid of the other Muslims that we see, because they could be potentially IS. That's one of their goals, and I think they are quite successful in that. If you look at the opinion polls in the US, for instance, the fear of an IS threat, which of course a threat to the US, it doesn't pose a real threat to the US right now. To the US interest, it does.
But then the question is, of course, are you afraid, or are you angry? Or I mean, may I ask you it straight to you? Are you afraid? And how is it successful also in I don't know, influencing your thoughts, or does it make you angry and say, you know, what the hell, we can't have this, we have to act against them? So that's a bit the difference between, let's say, short-term reactions like, oh my God, what the hell is this, you know, and then maybe to the long term. Are you really afraid? I'm just wondering. I ask you straight, you know, your personal opinion. Are you afraid because of these guys, or is it something? Is it another emotion?
Well, not to provoke any IS members, but I'm not afraid of them because I do not live in Syria. In Holland, I do not fear because I do not let myself get afraid of such people. And on I think the threat of me getting into an accident here caused by them is quite small. I think you have better numbers on that than I do. I think the risk of an attack in the Netherlands is quite small. And also, of course, it brings anger to you if you see those videos, because you're a human being and you see other human beings being slaughtered literally by barbarians almost. So that, of course, it brings some anger in you. But then if you rationalize it, that's exactly what they want. They want to make me angry. So it's of course difficult if you're just watching from your TV at night to stay calm. And of course, I understand if that's your child that you're seeing there being slaughtered, then yeah, there's just no rational option to engage with that.
Nelleke, are you afraid? And what do you think they are successful, or do you think these actions might be? I mean, we've heard some direct effects, tactical effects. As Ignacio said, or let's say on the battlefield, on the effect on their opponents, direct opponents, on their own ranks, and it looks like this is an incredible successful tool. But you, from the Netherlands, does it have an impact on you, or do you see negative side effects as well from these actions by IS? In the end, does it make them stronger or not?
I think that, well, I'm not afraid. I'm not, because for the same reasons as Armin, I think the actual chances are quite small. But I am worried because I do see that we had some demonstrations for IS and against IS in this city, a city we like to call a city of peace and justice. So I am worried because it has an effect, and those are small symptoms, but nevertheless, I think they're important because maybe we don't think that our Muslim neighbor is an IS person or a terrorist, but maybe some people do because they don't know the difference because they're not educated about it. We don't know. So I am worried. But on the long term, if they want to not just install fear, but establish a state, I don't think they'll be very successful because in the international system we have right now, fortunately, there's no room for states that are violent in that sense. So I don't think they're successful in the end. But I also don't think that means they're going to stop. But I do want to say that being not afraid is probably the only way to counter it.
That's interesting. I guess there's a huge difference between the short-term effect and the long-term effect, between tactical and strategic. Ignacio, you focus very much on the tactical effect, on the battlefield and on the ranks. But what's your take on the strategic effect, the long-term effect?
Well, I think what they are pretending is for the people to be thinking on them. So they repeat this kind of actions. Unfortunately, it's not the first one, neither the second, and probably they will continue. In fact, they are already menacing with a new killing, sending the video. So it seems this is a repetitive tactic they will continue using just to keep their idea in our minds, in the minds of the European people, that maybe first time they didn't grab and they didn't record on their minds, but once they realize this is more and more repetitive and they will potentially be the victims of this kind of terrorist groups, I think they pretend that to maintain their idea and their willingness in our minds. I think this is not something very, very easily achievable, but what is clear is that these guys, they control all the different steps they do. In the videos it's very clear, the stage is very, very studied before, and well, they have a very good plan on the long term. I don't know if that will be successful. I think honestly that maybe I'm not very representative. I've been living since I was born in a place with a high degree of terrorism in the Basque Country. I will say I'm not very afraid, although I recognize chances are and the percentage, the risk has a certain percentage, although reduced, but I do not think in this moment the population of Spain is afraid of that. They see the news on TV and they do not associate these videos with something that could happen here. They still are not making this kind of translation. And this is partially very shocking because we have the Islamic jihad, or you have some focus very, very clear in Ceuta and Melilla, our cities in the north shore of Africa, and our Guardia Civil and police are arresting people that are going to fight in the jihad in Syria, and this is something we have at home. But I think the population is not really concerned, even after the killings in Madrid in the trains. They think this is something isolated, and they are confident in the law enforcement forces. But I will wait for some time to see if people finally made this translation from the videos on TV to something that could happen here.
Well, that brings me to the question, should we show this on television? And what if you were a journalist or somebody who has a blog? Would you publish this? Would you bring this to the general public? Of course, these videos are out there on the internet. Nobody can stop that. But if you were a journalist, would you give it additional attention? Cassandra, you have ambitions in that direction. Maybe you have a blog, I don't know. Would you have published these videos? Would you have given it a lot of attention, as these guys definitely want?
First, no. I think it's very clear that that's what they want, and I think that we shouldn't contribute. It's kind of contributing for their cause by publishing these videos. I think it has to be mentioned because, anyways, these people they have families, and their families they want to bring attention. Maybe their governments can do something about it. But putting it in the spotlight of the media, of the main newspapers, I think this is exactly what they're looking for. That's exactly their point.
It is, of course, difficult. It's unstoppable. Social media are, it's out there everywhere. But of course, it depends very much on how much you're going to show. And it's actually surprising that a lot of providers, a lot of internet agencies, news agencies have managed to actually to make it a lot more difficult to quickly go to these videos. So you see that I guess the general attitude is to maybe show a still, a picture of that is not so horrible. But so far, of course I asked my own students, did you watch these videos? Actually, a minority had done so, and if you would try to find these videos now, you could still find them, but many media outlets try to, and also internet outlets, try to ban them as much, of course, as they can. Nelleke, of course, we asked also the students about this question. Were you, and we voted on that, did you, were you in favor of discussing this as we do right now? So apparently you are in favor of discussing this, but would you have uploaded these videos on your blog or whatever media you were responsible for?
No, we did discuss this, and I voted against it. But I think we also made a clear distinction between old and new media. And I think the older media, television, newspapers, that they shouldn't post this, and not even a still. I disagree with you, because if you open a newspaper and you see it without any warning, you don't know who's going to open that newspaper. And I remember someone saying, well, if you watch the 8 o'clock news, they'll warn you, but you're not really going to walk away often. So I think the classic media have a responsibility to report on it. I think that's very important. Because if we want to be discussing it, as we're doing right now, you need to be informed about what's happening. So you should report on it, but I don't think the imagery is necessary. I think, however, that if you want to research it, for example, that you should be able to watch the videos. So things like YouTube and social media give you a very deliberate personal choice of watching it or not. And I'm very much in favor of that. So I would say make it available, but only by choice.
Yeah, make sure that people not unintentionally are confronted with it, and then it's of course very difficult to look away. You've seen it already. Janine, either your take on this or some question, but I'm not sure if it worked out very well with the YouTube channel. So, but
Yes, actually it did work out very well. I have loads of questions from the audience now. So let me first summarize a few comments, because we have a lot of comments now. So thank you for all your questions and comments. First of all, regarding whether people are afraid, we have Sally Weinstock from the USA who said no, she's not afraid. But on the other hand, we had another person from the USA who said that there is a lot of fear now that fighters from IS will return to the States, and that there have even been calls that fighters come with Mexican immigrants through the border to actually enter the United States again. And that people are very afraid for these returning foreign fighters. There was also another question about foreign fighters. What about when foreign fighters join the Kurds or the Free Syrian Army? Are we then still afraid of these people? And how should we respond to them when they come back? So maybe it's interesting to discuss the issue of returning fighters.
yeah, thank you. Of course, returning foreign fighters is an element that definitely, a question that definitely popped up, especially because many of those that IS showed were not from Syria, were from other countries, including France. I remember that one of these French guys was a convert from a small town in Bretagne, and of course that has a shocking effect. And of course, people are worried that what will happen if this guy comes back. Well, especially these guys who've done these kind of things, I believe, I hope the secret services will manage to prevent that, especially those that are known, that have been on video. But of course, there are many other foreign fighters that have done horrible things that might return. We don't know what's going to happen. We've seen a number of examples, of course, in France and in Belgium, but so far not that much. And of course, that risk compared to the risk that a lot of Syrians face every day is enormous. So knock on wood, and let's hope that there will not be a next attack. But of course, there's no reason, or there are lots of reasons actually to expect that to happen. Foreign fighters who joined other groups, I guess there's reasons to worry about anybody who's been in Syria, who's been part of this fight, either as a victim or perpetrator, that many of them can come to Europe or other places very much, or in refugee camps in nearby countries that are very much traumatized or angry, or so that there's in general, I think there's an enormous problem with all these victims and perpetrators that have gone through all these incredible brutality. So it's much more than just alone foreign fighters from IS, but many of the fighters, many of the refugees. So it's an enormous problem. We're talking about millions of people, most of them in neighboring countries, and only a few returning. And of course, people in the United States might be worried about that, but of course that makes a lot of sense. But let's not forget, for instance, Jordan, Lebanon, or Syria. May I ask, Cassandra, are you now currently in Brazil, or are you in the region?
I'm in Italy.
In Italy. And in general, the issue of returnees, is that an issue in Italy?
The return?
The issue of people that return from the battlefields, or even refugees, that especially also in Italy, of course.
In Italy, I don't know what's the situation exactly with returning refugees, but there was a case of an Israeli Canadian that went to fight the Kurds with the Kurds, and she's still there, and she was in the Israeli army, and she was also a Canadian pilot, and now she joined the Kurdish fighters. And it's a big issue because from what I've been reading in the newspapers, the Israeli newspapers, no one knows what to do with her when she comes back and where. They don't know if she comes back to Israel, if Israel has to deal with her as an Israeli citizen fighting against ISIS. So I think it's, but still, she's a citizen of even if she was fighting for the ISIS, I think she's a citizen, a Canadian citizen, an Israeli citizen. She belongs to the place. She can't have like she will come back eventually.
Yeah, there's many European countries are confronted with people that joined other groups as well, including the Syrian army, people with a Syrian background, for instance, people with a Kurdish background joining Kurdish groups. We in the Netherlands even had a motor gang members that joined the fight on the side of the Kurds, apparently. So there's a wide range of people that, for many different reasons, have gone off to Syria. Making this an enormous difficult issue also from a legal perspective and also from a threat assessment perspective. Janine, are there more questions, more remarks before I would like to round up and make sure that this discussion 45 minutes about IS, I think it's interesting. We can talk we can go on for hours, but are there more questions from the audience that we definitely have to look at?
Yes, there were a number of remarks. One person, I'm not sure if I can find him anymore, said that maybe the whole support for IS is created by the foreign policy of the United States. So is it not the foreign policy of Western countries that is responsible for those radical groups getting more attention? So is it more the West than maybe what's happening there that is attracting people to go there? Maybe that's an interesting question.
An interesting question, a little bit away from the topic of why we have these videos, what's the goal, is it successful or not, but a valuable contribution to the debate. There are many different questions, and I definitely want to pay some attention to it. Maybe Armin again, and maybe Nelleke also with an interest in international relations. Is this all happening because of and I'm not sure I want to ask that question to Nelleke, who works at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so I'll ask Armin. Is it because of our foreign policy?
Well, not entirely, of course, but it did help. I mean, if you look at the age, I think, of the jihadi fighters who are there, the foreign fighters, I think a lot of them are, I think, my age, people who saw the events in 9/11, and after that 10 years of occupation in Afghanistan, in Iraq, whether you conceive it as a freedom operation or that's up to you. But the way some people interpreted it is as a humiliation. I mean, they removed presidents, they removed leaders. So there's a very much 2 points between the West and them in the East. So it's difficult to assess whether it's entirely up to that. I don't think it's that, but it did help. I mean, if you're dissatisfied with the way things are going in the West and what the West did, then that did help indeed to radicalize you or to be angry at the West.
Nelleke, do you dare to say something about this on this question?
I dare to, but only on a personal behalf. I don't think it's as easy as that. I think there's a lot of sources of why these groups arise. I'm a little bit skeptical to say it's only because of the past few years. There's always been terrorism. There's been several waves, as we've been taught. And I think these groups will always be there. And I think it maybe doesn't help our foreign policy of taking presidents away and involving ourselves so much. But I don't think it's a responsibility of our foreign policy. No, that's too easy.
Well, it's interesting, of course, a lot of people blame the West now for not doing enough. So it's either too much or not enough. And of course, if we look at the situation in Syria, it's a proxy war with a lot of different actors, Russians supporting one side, the Gulf state the other, private citizens another party, then their own government. What's the role of Turkey? I mean, there's Iran, Shia militias in Syria, Hezbollah in Syria. there's so many actors. So I also tend to, I would say that our foreign policy, or the Western foreign policy with regard to the Middle East, there's no way you could say it's been successful. It's a mess, and I think we have to critically look at what has been going on in the last 2 decades, and what we've done wrong, and maybe we neglected a number of issues. I'm not going to mention them here, but everybody might have some ideas about what went wrong, etc. That is not success, that's very obvious. But if you look at all the parties involved, and currently the attacks on IS, it's not a Western coalition, it's a lot of local parties as well that are involved. So this Western versus the rest of the world, I think Syria and Iraq are a clear example that unfortunately maybe it's much more complex than that. I have the tendency now, also with an eye on the clock, to keep it short, but I'm just wondering if, Ignacio, with your background, have you contributed, or at least I'm sure that if I look at your CV, that a lot of Western military have taken a lot of risks to bring stability in many parts of the world, including the Islamic part of the world. And therefore I would like to ask you whether you personally or some of your colleagues have gone and participate in missions, whether you think that this image that the West has done is the cause of all this. Not that this question, the person who asked the question said that, but the West is mainly to blame, or an important actor to blame, whether you agree on that.
Well, I think that at least it's a very personal point of view. Same when we were in Bosnia, and I think he did let's say a good job. But if we see today at the constitution they had and the administration that the European Union did with the Bosnian government, I think at the end is a weak country, a weak government. And let's say that my opinion is that we, from a political point of view, after the war, we did the easy job. We didn't enter in complicated issues to solve the Balkanic problem. And I think in the Afghanistan, I will say the same, almost the same. I totally agree with one of the movies that you recommend us in the course. That was, I think, the War of Senator Wilson or something like this. It's about Al Qaeda, how he obtained money just to give them new material, and finally they can defeat the Russians. And at the end of the movie, there is a very important sentence that the CIA agent tells him, you should work in education and provide funds to finish the job. We defeated the Russians, but this is not the job done. The next generation will give us some troubles. And I think from a certain point of view, once we finish this kind of, let's say, military assignments, or a lot of years that we are in the country, we always lack some more involvement. Maybe it's also true, they are free countries, they have to choose their own way. We cannot impose from the Western countries our policies. Of course, we can show them what is the way, or one of the paths, or the actions, or the ways we think, and they will have to decide. And I know this is not easy because they are very complicated cultures.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely complicated countries and cultures, especially Syria, Iraq, and unfortunately, one of the reasons, maybe together with foreign policy, etc., reasons why there's so much violence going on, and also that I guess that we cannot be too positive about a solution very soon. So unfortunately, I guess we're gonna watch more of these IS movies and other movies and videos of atrocities in the region. I'm just wondering what the effect will be if we see more of these pictures. My take is that, also listening to the students, that the more of these videos they see, the impact will diminish. Well, let's hope that one day there's no reason that we have to see these videos, because there will be peace, but that would probably be a bit of too naive to hope for instance, the next year. But that, I guess we all agree that that would be one of our big wishes for 2015, that we would not see these videos anymore because there's peace in the region. Unfortunately, that will not be very likely. Let's hope we move in that direction. And for now, with an eye on the clock, I would like to close this session and thank all the participants for their contribution. Also, Janine, thank you for monitoring what's going on with regard to the questions. I'm sure that there's lots of questions we cannot answer, but we have to stop here. So thank you, Nelleke, Armin, Ignacio, and Cassandra for participating. I'm sure we will have more of these Google Hangouts. I love to have this discussion with participants of the course and participants of the bachelor course, and bring all these different views together. Views from Brazil, Israel, Spain, the Netherlands, and I think, Armin, you have a Hungarian, Iranian background, so I think that's the way to discuss these very complex issues, is sharing ideas from around the world, from people with different backgrounds. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you again in class, or while you are participating in this Coursera course on terrorism and counterterrorism. So thank you very much for your input.